Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up.
Hello, Ben.
Hi, Jeremy. Happy Friday.
Yeah, Friday indeed. And welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of Burgess and Bolton's weekly wrap-up, where we look at everything to do with the London market, technology, change, innovation. This week, we're going to focus on London market claims. But first up in the waffle shop, Ben, a bit of news, as we always do. So I think you found this one. Insurance needs $1 trillion. That sounds like a lot from private equity to close gaps, says Aon chief. It's Greg Case.
Greg Case is the Aon chief, yeah. So it's a story, kind of wraps up a few things here fairly neatly, which is the whole discussion on underinsurance globally and at the same time, the need for the insurance industry to grow, which we've talked about before. So these are probably mutually compatible things, I guess. So there's a commercial side and a kind of helping humanity side. And I think the 1 trillion is a round number rather than a precise number. So a few facts that are stated in the article. A third of the cost of the material of the natural disaster since 2000 has only been covered by insurance. So, you know, there's a lot that isn't covered, and that's the protection gap. Insurance has started to attract some funds from various, as we know, from various sort of sovereign wealth funds, pension funds, and so on. So this is starting. That's the article, and it's beginning to grow. Apparently, we don't really have any evidence in the article for that particularly. Case reckons that the investment will double in the next 5 years. They have in the last, I think this is the last 5 years. It's not clear in the article, but cat bonds and ILS and other non-insurance capital has been about $115 billion. So I'm thinking the article saying we're going to be talking about 250-ish to 300. So still 700 short of the $1 trillion. So it's going to have to grow from various places. So he's talking about private equity and all sorts of things, really. I think private equity is just one of the things. But then you kind of sort of think that's great, and then ponder what it means, and there's some interesting comments under the article as well. So what the question is that's rather slightly strangely posed at the end of this article, which Greg Case says, I think, is if we don't understand it, you don't put your capital behind it, right? So this is the idea, really, that this is quite volatile, risky investing. You know, cat bonds had a pretty rough time of it, I think.
Right.
And then raises the question, and I think this is Greg Case raising the question, it's not clear in the article. Capital asks if the volatility is worth it. That's the question at the end of this article. It doesn't have any comment around it, but I think what it's saying is, or Greg Case is saying is, can we prove the value of this investment to the capital providers versus safer investments? So this is a big ask. And I had a look around, actually, and there's quite a whole load of stuff about how private equity companies work. You know, they kind of put the money into their own pockets at some point, and you know, that's kind of lots of investments. So it is sort of questionable. And then there's also the other thing that I believe these cat bonds are pretty complex things when they're set up, you know, for not necessarily huge returns. So anyway, it's kind of an interesting point. It is about insurance, it's about growth, but I think there are a huge number of questions about whether the insurance industry will really have the investment appeal that it thinks it does or it thinks it should have. So I think this has to be discussed and debated more. But it's a pretty big issue because, as Case says, you kind of failed if you don't cover these risks. And he's going well. He's going well beyond insurance. He said that this isn't just insurers. This is, global capital, as it were.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. I'd say a little bit in this article, but unformed yet as to what this all means. As are many things in the insurance industry, but yeah.
So it raises for me some questions around kind of innovation and kind of responding to existing risks and new risks as they come up. So, okay, so on the one hand, we need that capital in order to underwrite them, but you've also got to have, products that work, that people will want to buy at the end of the day. And I think that is another big question. Is there an innovation around the products and services that, in the past you get a check and you go, okay, right, my car's broken. I can now use it for me to fix it, and I know how to do that. Take it to the garage or whatever the thing is. Obviously, a simple example, but the world's a lot more complicated than that now. And I just sometimes wonder whether, as an industry, we're moving quickly enough to keep up with the change. It isn't just about cash.
I agree with you. I mean, I think it sets there to sort of stall and so on. What I think the other point is data, really. I mean, this is a bet, right? Insurance is a bet, where you look at it. It's an informed bet, an intelligently based bet. I don't know, but it's a bet nonetheless. And the more we are in a world where these risks are changing all the time, and it looks, Swiss Re has said, I think, that the cat models didn't catch up with secondary perils, for example, wildfires and the like. And so you've got things like that, which are pretty big, where, blimey, are these underwriters basing their decisions on and pricing risk on knowledge and data, or they're just giving a bit of a sort of finger in the air, we need some business type thing? So I agree with you. I think we've got to go into innovation. I think we've got to have this bottomed out much more. I think you've got to have an industry that gets better really at data, gets better at evaluating these risks. And I think it's going to have to attract more, let's say more scientific, more engineering talent, more of that sort of stuff, more of this, as you say, these people who live in these more complex environments and understand them. I think more expertise is required than there is currently, which is not a bad thing. I just think it's not really mentioned in this article, and we've just talked about money and money raising as opposed to an industry that really understands where things are going. And I think that's important.
Yeah, me too. Good article, that. So let's move things on a bit. So I was going to. I started the show by talking about a focus on London market claims. So the reason for this is we got our claims conference coming up in October, and as part of that, we wrote a bit of a summary, I suppose, of what the anticipated themes for this year's event are, and these fed into the agenda and things like that. And I thought it'd be good just to kind of talk around some of them, Ben, just to get your thoughts on them, and to steer away a bit from tech, although tech does come through obviously as a huge driver for change and uncertainty within the claims community, but perhaps have a wider conversation about really what's on the, or should be on top of the agenda when we're talking about claims in the London market, and how we're going to drive up claims performance, not just for insurers and brokers, but to meet those kind of customer expectations, to try and look at the value chain. Let's look at the whole big picture. But I am going to start with AI and automation, because that is probably one of the top issues that is concerning people, both in terms of an opportunity. So how can this technology be applied, but also as a threat, to kind of traditional ways of working. I think there is still a fear in there, and whether the market is really ready to embrace that type of technology when actually they're still operating on systems and processes that are, very manual or need quite a lot of human intervention. And yeah, we're still experimenting. Kind of what we've talked a bit about technology over the last few weeks. Last week we took a contrary view on AI. What do you think about AI within claims, Ben, as the impact?
I don't know. I think it's. I mean, obviously it's early days. I think there's some. Well, I think it can do a lot of, like in all other areas where there's data knocking around. It could do a lot of and linear processes. I think AI could help out at the very basic level, doing things that we don't want to do. Get rid of those admin layers. I think that would be probably a good thing. Sort of duplication, rekeying, and error and things. So that yes, obviously, no surprises there. I think, can you have it doing sorting through actual claims? Yes, I think you can. I think the difficulties are going to be really kind of systemic concerns. That the AI kind of messes it up over and over again, and biases or something like that, which I think is quite, in an industry where the data isn't great.
Yeah,
it leaves you. That is a concern, I think. And I'm not just talking about commercial or motor or stuff like that. I'm also saying because it kind of gets into the space of things like liability, which is tricky because it's about people and stuff that people do. So it touches on humans, and then you get obviously into the sort of life type areas, and where you've got more and more difficulty. So I think it's also, I think, from experience of working in claims or with claims teams, is there's a huge amount of judgment still, I think, in claims. I mean, I don't think everybody knows this. They probably do listen to this show, but a lot of the time on bigger claims or complex claims, you may an insurer makes a decision on a number of factors as to whether they will pay that claim or not, or whether they'll partially pay it or whatever. It isn't just my car crashed, here it is, there's a certain amount of coverage. It's and there's an element of, because it's indemnity largely, or it's covering a loss, you are constantly having to work out as to on shifting sands what's happening. So and you've got trauma and emotion and everything else involved in it. So I think there's a huge amount of human element to it still, really, if you're thinking of where does it all go in future. There are clearly, I mean, I think on the legal side, actually, there's probably quite a lot there that actually, from what I read, AI can do, scanning documents, checking things, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, I mean, that could be, I've always felt that contractual law and contracts is a ridiculous money spinner for lawyers, because they constantly re-question very, very basic documents, which seems ludicrous to me. Just why don't we have a standard terms document for most things that we do? So yeah, I think that it'll have a role, but I don't know that. I think it's going to struggle in some of those areas where judgment is required.
Yeah, I think that piece that you just talked about around kind of data and the, I guess, unstructured and not very clean, or the quality of it is not up to scratch. I think that is a big problem, and being able to move that around to the right people within the organization at the right time, and in order to enhance that decision making, I think that will be the kind of first step. If we can achieve that, that would be a massive step forward, because
I agree. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, a good example is claims portals, which have been around for a while now, particularly in the UK GI market, not in London. If you think, so say what, 7-8 years, I suppose the first one came out, either AXA or Allianz, and they allowed brokers dealing with claims to self-serve the MI off that platform for many classes of business and many claims, and just report back on what's going on. They still, though, really, really rely on people to answer questions and so on. And that they're not necessarily updates. They're just really genuinely questions about the claim and what's happening and what's needed. And that seems to be, I don't think brokers want to do that. I think they'd be very happy just to get it off the system and carry on, but they're still, doing that. So there is still, even there where there's been quite a heavy investment and those systems are used, the technology is largely taken for granted. It's just what it is. And it's, the element of the experience, if you like, the wider experience of claims is still very much got humans involved.
Yeah. And I think that kind of touches on one of the other themes that comes out of this, which is kind of balancing technology with talent. So there's a real concern about how innovation affects the workforce. We can see from the research that we've done for the conference that there's kind of real call for stronger leadership around this, better skills development, and a push to make claims a kind of, they say, a career destination, rather than something you just fall into. You're actually positively choosing. Yeah. I think it's how do we lead that change and get people motivated with the right skills in order to deliver that improved service. It's kind of bringing it all together, isn't it, around. So, and I think that's where we kind of flail around a bit. We can't quite crystallize that and have it as a strategic vision for claims directors and claims functions. I think that would be that might help. But I mean, what do you feel like working with claims teams, Ben? Do you feel like they have that kind of, this is where we are now, this is where we need to get to or want to get to?
No, I don't think they do. I mean, there's a slide, if you can put it up, from the ICP research that we did. I think it's 3, maybe slide 3, that one. I think this is a global study that we did with the IACP, saying it is becoming more important as a selling point for insurance, which is good because competition should drive innovation. But how prepared do they feel? Well, somewhat prepared is kind of an on the fence type of answer, I think. And really, no one's really very prepared, and that feels kind of worrying, I think. And I think people are worried, and the things that they're talking about here are technology and soft skills, really. The combination of, and I think that if you move on, there's a slide about the sweet spot, I think it is, or any of the ones with, this one. So this is, I've showed this for years, this slide at various your conferences and other places, and nobody takes much notice of it. But I think they should now, because it's kind of what's happening, right? And we've got a sort of special, in London particularly, a kind of specialist viewpoint, but a lot of what we do is volume vanilla type claims, and you've got to say, well, how far commercially, for cost effective reasons, can you push this to the left? So in other words, technology does more of the heavy lifting than people, and you create a cost saving there at the same time as freeing people up to become more focused on the solutions. So the cost of a solution, solving things with a person, is quite high, is very high. The cost of doing it when it's automated is low, obviously, and it speeds up things, which matters. So I think it's about how you move that sweet spot. We've seen examples where that's been the company hasn't thought about it. This is big companies haven't thought about it, and they've kind of sacked everybody and put the technology in, and then found they've got real problems because they haven't got enough people. Some extent that happened in COVID. Actually, it really showed how important people were, and when they were absent, either because they were at home or they decided to take early retirement, it really caused a problem. So this balance is not easy to achieve when people don't have great data and systems generally aren't great. So I think the question is going to be very clunky moving from right to left here, I think, in claims.
Yeah.
And it's going to be quite difficult for the people. If imagine you're a 20, 25 years in technical claims manager, know what you're doing, know about claims, do all that sort of stuff. And then, people come along and go, well, this pretty brilliant system here, it's got AI, it's got all this sort of tools and things. What do you think at that point your job is? And I don't mean in the sort of simplistic fashion of, I'd still have a job. I think people rightfully can say, oh, well, hang on a minute, but what happens to all the stuff that I did that wasn't really codified, wasn't in a system? It was just when I picked the phone up and chatted to somebody about it, chatted to the broker, talked to the customer, thought of an idea of making this particular claim work better on the day, even, this is a real issue, even we hear stories, often where claims teams say, well, there isn't, we can avoid a claim and still sort your problem out, in various ways. I mean, a good example is equine. If you have an injured horse, if the horse dies, then the claim goes in, right? Which the insurer doesn't particularly want, obviously, but nor does the owner of the horse. So if the insurer says, well, actually, we've got, we can make some recommendations about how you, kind of fix the horse up and make it better again, then everybody's happy, right? So I think those take human interventions and human ingenuity. Anyway, that's kind of where it is still moving from right to left inevitably, because that's progress. But it's tricky in claims.
Yeah. Should we talk about the skills slide as well?
Yeah.
Feed into it, I think.
So really it is. It also shows where our mindset is in claims, because we do, this is based on a contrast between what internally claims teams describe their strengths as. So that's the left-hand axis. So expertise is really always higher up. They believe expertise is really, really important. And I don't kind of have an issue with that at all. Obviously, expertise is important, but it's kind of table stakes. When we look at net promoter scores, whether the claims brokers dealing with the customers are happy with what they've got. It's not that. It's other things. It's communication, speed, the relationships, but those are actually the teams themselves see those as much less important. So we've got a kind of cultural mindset shift, if you like, as well, in a world where you've also got to have digital skills. So I think it's, Caroline Bedford's phrase comes to mind, digital minds, so you've got there's a human who's very, very conscious and very aware of the digital tools, but still acts like a human, if you like. And that's a real challenge for organizations now to manage that for the future. And the future's kind of not very far away.
Yeah.
The one thing about AI, right, and we talk about it a lot, and we guess at all these things, but the one thing about AI is it's happening very quickly and much faster than any technology I've certainly seen, I think. Even when the internet came in, this is massively quicker and things are moving on at pace. And there's not a day goes by where you're going to go, wow, that's interesting. God, that's new. How did they do that? So with all that happening, it's going to have some sort of impact. It's just when, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting what you were saying about kind of that disconnect between what internal claims teams think are important and what customers or brokers are telling them there are important, because that also comes up in the survey. It's like, and it's I guess, defined in the research we've done is kind of how do we put the customer at the center of kind of decision making? Because there seems to be all these other key kind of criteria that people are working to that are actually not about, as you say, trying to solve a problem for a customer. And I think understanding what great customer service looks like, I think, is the first starting point. And I think there is a disconnect between, you know, the people on the ground who are doing this stuff, these claims, and kind of the people who are talking to the customers, and that needs to be addressed, I think.
I think it does, and I think that, you know, the claim is often a long way away from when the policy was written, you know, or the underwriter who wrote that policy. So I think you know, and businesses are trying to do this, is they're trying to bring that point closer so that actually you're anticipating risk and you're mitigating risk. And I think this is fundamentally about the value chain and everybody understanding how the value chain works and how they operate and what they're supposed to be delivering to that customer. In the past, I don't think it's worked like that as much, you know, as well. And I think still has a long way to go. You know, and I think that the problem you get when it's not working well is that each bit just, you know, each part of that value chain just does its own thing, and it gets very clunky, and you get all the friction that you see when you have claims yourself, you know, which is one party not talking to another, not understanding, duplication, all of that sort of stuff, but also a loss of empathy, I suppose, through that whole process, because some people just, and we get a lot of this in our data now, with brokers saying, oh, well, you know, claims adjusters and insurers need to realize there's a real person at the end of this. Now that sounds like, oh yeah, well, that's obvious, mate. But actually that's really important. It's not just important because it's important, you know, for obvious reasons. It's important because that's the product we're delivering. And that's what the customer will say, I actually value and would be prepared to pay more for. So that's why I think claims is so important, because I think we've got to get the customer to understand that actually a great claim service is really, really valuable when you need it. I mean, you understand it in healthcare, don't you, in a way? I mean, you know, a lot of people do buy private medical insurance, not, you know, because they think actually the experience is going to be far better in a private hospital than going into the NHS. Now, that may sound unfair, but it's kind of how people think, is that I'm prepared to pay for that if I've got the money. Now, all I'm really saying is that people will pay for the better experience, but we don't sell the better experience in claims. I don't think we sell the experience at all, quite frankly. We sell the payment, but not the experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. One other slide. I don't know if this is the right time to put it up, Ben, but
yeah.
Just looking at claim service here. It's kind of, this graph looks like it's risen. This is from 2022 to, well,
yeah,
to date.
So it has been, I mean, this is London Market MPS, all insurers, and it's going up. I mean, obviously the average, you've got a big gap, first of all, between really good players who are really investing in, I suppose, service and the experience, and the rest of the market where there's a mixed bunch. And so it's, but both in kind of positive territory in MPS, which isn't bad, I think, for a market. So you've got players up at 47, 48 MPS. Now, regardless of what you think of MPS, those are pretty good scores, pretty good service scores, pretty satisfied customers saying this is great. When you look at a lot of this, though, and I'm not saying all of this, because I think some insurers are really beginning to cotton on to the points of being where they could be better than everybody else and beat the competition. There isn't a lot going on in London, though, I don't think, compared, say, with the UK market, where there's a lot of technology in play. There's I said it at the LMA last week, actually. There needs to be a thought now that something needs to break, because you can't keep, and it is leveling off, you can't keep on running hard with lots of people, the kind of brilliant basics of service. You've got to do something now to break the mold a little bit. So some company or something needs to come along and kind of break this a bit. And it might mean that the average goes down, but certain players absolutely break out of, you know, and start sprinting off in the distance, and everybody catches up, which is kind of, you know, those innovation charts tend to go like that, not smooth.
Yeah.
So it needs a jump somehow. And I think, your question about technology is one of them. The other question is, what if we started to really focus? What if someone's really started to get their customer strategies right, really started to understand what people wanted, which we've had in, multitudinous other industry sectors where, I mean, Amazon being a really obvious example, but my God, that shook up the whole global retail industry really out of nowhere. And what did they do? They focus on customers. Bezos always had a spare chair in the room to say, the spare chair with no one sitting in it is the customer. And that's what we maybe need to do in insurance now.
Definitely. So there's a bunch of topics there. We've got a whole load of other stuff that we could have talked about. The operational challenges. Obviously, there's Blueprint 2 that's driving change. There'll be quite a lot coming up over the next few months around that as well, and also the new kind of risks that we started off the show. So climate and cyber. How do we make sure claims teams are ready for those? There's also the claims being adopted as the fifth principle or fifth hurdle.
Fourth hurdle.
Yeah. So there's a whole load of stuff we'll be covering, and should be good.
I think there's an interesting point, which is just a thought, which is, I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, is there a non-technology strategy here that might work too? I'm quite a fan of counterfactuals when everybody's saying AI is absolutely essential and all that sort of thing. Well, what if you just didn't waste all that time on AI and tech and just said, well, let's just get a really fantastic people service that everybody loves? And, this isn't far-fetched, because the restaurant industry kind of went to McDonald's at one end of things, and everybody went, wow, bloody hell, you can make a lot of money if you're at McDonald's with your process and your kind of tasteless food. But it's convenience, right? But actually, you still got a very kind of thriving, gastro pubs, restaurants that, jump up all over the place, and they're still there, right? So I think we might need to think about lots of things happening, boutique type claim services.
Yeah, I think that would be. I think that would be great, and I think that's exactly the types of conversations that we'll be having in October, and obviously in the build-up as well. So we'll keep you posted as that agenda comes together and gets released. But thanks for that. I enjoyed that discussion. Let's move things on. Let's talk about information is beautiful. What is this website that you found?
Well, I've used this for a few years. This is a guy who's written some really great books actually on presenting data. And the thing about it is that can you present information in a simple and compelling way? And so if you go to this website called Information is Beautiful, you'll see all sorts of really interesting graphics. And if you do anything with data at all, I'd recommend going there and have a look, because it's quite some of it's really ingenious. And I think if you also want to get the book, because just sort of, it's a bit of a coffee table book, but if you kind of rifle through it, just, with a glass of wine or drink of your choice, you kind of get into there's so much you can do with data in terms of, making it relevant. And maybe we should have this as a topic, because there's quite a few people who've done this really, really well, and we don't do it much in insurance anyway. This one, just by example, is quite cool, because it's myths. So it's all the myths, and it's just presented so that you can kind of scroll through on the website of all these different myths. So something like brainwashing. There's no evidence that people's minds can be changed against their will. Water and electricity. Water itself doesn't conduct electricity. It's actually an insulator. But substances dissolved in water, salts, etc., can often conduct current. See, I didn't know that.
No.
And now I'm reading through.
Yeah.
Waving your phone around does not improve your phone signal. In fact, it makes it worse and makes you look like an idiot. 8 glasses of water a day, which I hear a lot of. People walking around with these ever larger. My daughter has the biggest water bottle ever. And there must be 3 litres in there. And she's not very big. Anyway, complete lack of evidence. Adequate fluid intake is met through water, milk, juice, coffee, wine. I added wine.
I like the one that were just 5 senses, because that's almost taught, isn't it? We actually have close to 20, including balance, pain, movement, hunger, thirst, etc. There you go.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I didn't. I mean, you kind of just accept these things, don't you?
Yeah.
The one that gets me there is oil stops pasta sticking, because I always put oil in thinking that, and they've killed that now.
Yeah. Approach this website with caution. You know, you may find yourself leaving going, oh, God, I don't know anything. I thought I knew something, but I don't know anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, 3-second memory for a goldfish. It's not on there, but what do you reckon?
Well, it can't be true, can it?
Well, not the smartest. Goldfish boast a memory span of 3 months. Better than most politicians, it says here. Einstein failed maths. That's one, isn't it? That's one you hear all the time. He actually didn't. He failed an entrance exam for a school, but he still excelled in maths. I like that one, because I just thought that must be ridiculous. I mean, if you listen to anything or read anything about Einstein, there's no way he can be bad at maths.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all good stuff. Yeah, it is really interesting, isn't it? How they present the data, how we absorb it, how it becomes, I don't know, just as it becomes a myth. Yeah.
Yeah, like the 5-second rule. The amount of bacteria transferred to a fallen food depends on how contaminated the floor is, not how long the food stays there. I kind of always known that, but I didn't like to say to people who say 5 seconds.
Yeah. Good. That's a bit of fun.
Last one. Great Wall of China is not visible from space to the naked eye. I thought that was absolutely true.
Oh, that was nailed on. That's the only thing you could see.
I mean, that's kind of annoying.
It is really.
Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
There you go. Good. And yeah, I was going to ask you, Ben, are you going to see the big gig this weekend? Start of the big tour?
I don't really like Oasis that much.
Nor do I. No.
I like Champagne Supernova. I think that's really good. The rest of it I could take or leave, quite frankly.
Yeah, me too. I can't think of anything worse than going to, I don't know where these gigs are, but full of basically people my age thinking that they're 20 again.
I know there's a lot of that, and I'm from near Manchester, as you are.
Yeah,
but they're kind of I always found the most annoying characters.
Yeah,
the two of them.
Yeah, there we are.
But it is apparently big. It is apparently big. Did you watch Glasto?
I did. I watched your set. I thought Pulp were great.
Oh yes, I was on. Yeah, did you like the way I'd covered it up by calling it patchwork?
Yes, brilliant. The worst kept secret ever.
And this week I've been reading the shipping forecast as well. Have you seen that?
Yeah, it was on the radio this morning. I was like, wow.
Sarah, Norfolk, Sarah.
Yeah.
Gale force winds expected 11 o'clock. I could do that. I could do that.
I once saw Jarvis Cocker when we had an office in London, in Great Portland Street, and he was in the Pret and he was buying a sandwich, and I was utterly starstruck. I was just, I couldn't move. I was like, oh my God, it's Jarvis Cocker. Couldn't say anything. He walked out and that was it.
I never want to say. Do you know, I haven't told my story on here, have I? Perhaps I have. If I have, tell me, because this would be embarrassing on a show like this. Who I played golf with the other week.
No, you didn't. You told me, but you haven't told the world.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I was just playing on my own, and someone who was the pro came up to me and said, "Oh, there's another chap here who's just playing this afternoon because he's just visiting. Would you join up with him to play?" And I said, "Yeah." Anyway, long story short, DJ Spoonie.
There you go.
Do you know who DJ Spoonie is?
I do. He used
Well,
to
if
be
anybody does, he was a Radio 1 DJ. He's now on Radio 2. His real name is Jonathan, and he's a pretty damn good golfer, actually. DJ Spoonie, and he gave me a couple of like lessons, like a bunker lesson, a chipping lesson, which he did with good grace. He wasn't like, you know, and I said thanks very much, and I said, have you thought of doing a book? You could call it Spoonie's Tips. And he said, you know what? He said it's not a bad idea. He said it'd only be 3 pages long though.
Yeah.
But no, there you are. That's the sort of person I play with, DJ Spoonie.
I thought you said when he gave you some lessons, it was going to be in like mixing music together on turntable.
He did ask me about what music I liked and was I into music, and he asked me a lot about whether I listened to Radio 2 and his show in particular, that's true of all celebs I've ever met. They always ask you a lot about whether you listen to them or see them. You know, they're kind of slightly on the narcissistic.
We're going wrong.
Sorry?
That's where we're going wrong, because we absolutely do not ask anybody whether they listen to our show.
I know, that's a lesson for us, I tell you, yes. I should have told him I got a show.
Yeah.
On Friday.
He could have been out there plugging it on his Radio 2.
I said, listen and learn, Spoonie. Listen and learn.
That's it. Good. Right, what are you doing this weekend? I've actually got a really busy weekend of various things going on. Fates and I'm not organising a fate, but going to a fate, and my boy's got an awards thing, football awards thing, and then playing football. Gosh. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not doing anything.
Huh.
I'm literally not doing anything because I've been busy all week, and we've been busy every weekend. So no, not doing anything.
Good. I'd watch the tennis because it's been super so far.
Tour de France starts, by the way. BTW. I'm going to get that on the show next week.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited. So yeah, I'm
a little bit late to the party. I'm going to be doing a bit of the old pre-research on it today. I think my wife's quite excited about it as well, so we're going to watch it together. My wife and I will watch it together.
Excellent. Fun times to be had. Right. Great. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next week. And have a good weekend.
Have a good weekend. Bye.